Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to episode 74 of Lifestyle Pirates with me, Big J, and him, Adriano.
Hello.
I said Pirates.
It's with Lifestyle Pirates.
Lifestyle
I was pretty shocked they were up to episode 74. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we'll get to 100. This episode, we're joined by a good friend of mine, an ex-work colleague, Margo Hofmann. How are you, Margo?
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the madness.
So great to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming here. First time in Piedmont, you just said.
Pretty much.
Yeah. What do you think?
It's beautiful.
Yeah? It's not bad, is it? I've just told everybody where the studio is and where the house is. But anyway.
You just doxed yourself.
Absolutely. So, Margo, we've known each other through ex-corporate jobs, but we're going to talk a little bit today about consumer behaviour because you are a tutor at UNSW. UNSW on consumer behaviour. We went out a couple of months ago for a few wines, got really into this. And I think it started over a glass and probably finished with a bottle or two because there's a lot to unpack. Then we won't cover it all tonight. But
What was my invite?
it was I sent it to you. But you've actually been in marketing, content, and advertising for over 20 years as well. So this isn't just talking about your UNSW side. This is obviously part of what you've lived and breathed. And for those of you that know me, love the show, love the podcast, you know I love marketing as well. So talk to us. How did you get into consumer behaviour?
Oh, by accident. But I have a lovely friend at the university who needed a tutor at the last minute, and I was able to slot in because of my experience. So I think one of the most important things for this podcast is to use some of the consumer behavior skills right up front, which is I'm going to frame your expectations for the podcast. Because if you don't frame people's expectations of what they're likely to hear, then they're much less likely to be satisfied. So we want you guys to be satisfied. So we're going to cover basically how your mind forms preferences, makes decisions, and so you have an understanding of your buying choices, but also how this might affect your relationships and your career, because this is how your mind works sort of quite broadly. So these are hopefully a few tricks that you can keep in mind as you're perusing the marketplace, and then also at home trying to keep people engaged.
Yeah, well, I'm interested on the relationship stuff.
As an adult, is there any way to break away from that, or is there subconscious bias that that's you?
So we're all individuals, right? But we also all have the same basic structures in our brain. So we all experience memory, but we all experience memory in a different way. We all experience social influences, but we all experience that in a different way. And so your awareness, your attention, these things are finite. So the issue is that in the current environment, there's so much noise, and it's really, really difficult for your brain to shut down, focus, achieve flow, be calm. And so you can't get out of the environment that we're in. So the best thing you can do is learn to make rules for yourself about how to just ignore that stuff. So that's part of what I'm hoping to include here.
Awesome.
There's a cool book by Johan Hari called Stolen Focus, and he talks a lot about that in terms of just the ongoing distractions and noise, as you say, that just really disrupt our flow, be that from a living, be that from an experiencing, be that from a working. We can't get into that rhythm and routine anymore because there's always something happening. And the more gizmos and gadgets and the more streaming shows we have and everything on the social side, it's just kind of designed to interrupt our time and interrupt our day and interrupt our relationships for an outcome.
Absolutely. And like marketers are constantly looking at different points in your cognitive processes that they can interfere with.
Yeah.
And that just means that's happening to everybody basically 24/7, whether it's a billboard or digital advertising or any of these other mechanisms. You are unable to control your own focus right now.
Yeah. So but before we get into that, what got you into marketing in the first place? You said you've been doing it for 20 years. You've done advertising content. What turned you on about it?
Oh, actually, I had this really great exercise. So my dad sort of sat me down as I was going to university, and he was like, I want you to write your top 10 values and the top 10 things that are most important to you. And then we whittled that list down. And at the end of the day, something came up like being creative and communicating with people or something like that. I don't really remember anymore. But sitting there and doing that when I was 18 was one of the best things my dad ever gave me, because I knew then when I was at university that the way I thought I could use my skills would be in something like advertising. Because I'm creative, but I'm also pragmatic. Like I didn't want to be a starving artist. I'm somewhat hungry now, but no.
We all are, Margo.
Yeah.
We all are. Well, especially you, mate. You need a burger.
Thanks, mate.
I was about 1 million miles away from what you've just said when I decided to do marketing. I literally drew where home was. I drew on the map where a girlfriend I was seeing at the time was at university, and went, which is university, and I liked marketing because it was like I figured every company needed marketing. And I always had a bit of an affection and affinity with people. I've always been very good at talking to people and establishing rapport and all of that. So, yeah, very different to you. Very different to you. Okay. So for the untrained, do you have a definition of what consumer behaviour is?
Thank you for that. I was going to ask.
Oh, goodness. I guess I probably should, but I don't. But it's basically a decision-making process, and it has a variety, maybe 6 or 7 primary influences. So those include like how much of a desire you feel and how incentivized you are to act on that desire, in addition to some of the things I mentioned before around like your memory, your awareness, your ability to stop what you're doing and take care of that need at a certain point in time.
Yeah. And I feel like we've got to take people on a wee bit of a journey, right? So how typically has consumer behaviour been influenced? Not current state, but I remember when Adriana and I used to do gigs, we'd be sending out flyers, like literally printing flyers, and it was like, right, well, we've got to book this venue. We then hand out a load of flyers. We tape them to lampposts. You know, you'd even do a flyer drop sometimes. Real estate agents do it all the time, right? That's obviously a very simple and easy and maybe not effective way. Like, what's obviously been some of the changes over the years of trying to influence and get people to make a decision to either buy your product, come to your events, and then where does that kind of come from?
For sure, yeah. So, I mean, most of us are immersed in a digital marketing landscape, right? So you have algorithms that have been learning off of strategic marketers to now personalize content. So, you know, we wouldn't imagine that it would know that at 6 p.m. you're more tired, so I can get you to buy something that you are sort of more on autopilot to just consume. But the algorithm would know that, your behavior patterns. So this is the stuff we were talking about at the bar, where we've actually been conditioned.
It was the library, Margo.
Oh, yes, at the library.
Remember we were both researching?
So we were. So this is the kind of results they're seeing out of research now, which is that people have been conditioned to compulsive behavior, and they have shorter attention spans, and they've become addicted to technology because that's what the technology is designed to do. Of course, when you know that your attention is finite and your awareness is finite, you think of all the things that you're losing when your attention is spent on marketing messages instead of, say, your partner or your hobbies or anyone or anything else that you would rather have that time for. So the big loss in the culture that people don't really realize is your ability to control your own time. And because your mind is so distractible, this is probably the source of what's making people feel disgruntled in modern life. It's controlling your time and feeling like you can steer the trajectory of where you're going, because we're already under sort of like an administrative harassment from lawyers and contracts and new apps that we've got to sign up for, and then let alone, you know, taxes and compliance obligations and insurance. And so governments do not make policy decisions based on how much will this encroach on people's time. They just make a new requirement and they make you jump through the hoop. And after, 70 years of that, all we're doing is jumping through hoops. Mm-hmm. So basically, I've got some strategies here so you can hopefully reclaim your time, at least in the marketplace. And there's not that much you can do on the policy side unless you get governments to stop, stop holding them accountable, saying, well, I want this much money to go to education, I want this much money to go to defense. You need to talk to your politicians about, I want my time back, and I want you to be evaluated for helping me save time.
Sounds good.
I hope so.
Share some strategies.
So let's start.
Sure.
Let's begin.
So I always open the class with, basically stories about billionaires getting divorced. Because in theory, if you have comparably infinite money, You should be able to solve all relationship problems if it's just about throwing resources at the problem. But it's not, right? So one of the biggest reasons why marriages fail is because we don't frame our expectations. So I know Adriano works for Ferrari. There's an expectation of a Ferrari versus a Honda. And this is a joke I always make, which is that we think we want to marry a Honda, but we're always chasing the Ferrari. And then if you don't make quite clear expectations of what you're looking for in a partner, it's much harder to be satisfied.
Is that on both sides?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I really think that kind of the big breakdown would have happened sort of with the breakup of the nuclear family, women's empowerment, and those are all great things. But when mom was at home with the kids and dad was going to work, those were two very clear roles, and people knew the expectations. And now that's broken down, and that's great, right? Like we have new flexibility, but the expectations aren't clear. And when the expectations aren't clear, you can't succeed. Yeah. And so if you can't succeed, you go, well, the problem must be my partner. But actually the problem is you never agreed in the first place what they were supposed to do.
And actually,
that's massive.
I don't want to go for too much of a tangent there. Don't want to go for too much of a tangent, but I think to that point as well, when we're talking about the equality side, no one is told. I've got a lot of female friends that do very, very well in the corporate world, and they own businesses and they're C-suite and all of that. No one has really kind of educated the man on how that now role works, because we've obviously all been always brought up with, the husband is the breadwinner, wife looks after the kids, all that kind of stuff. But now those roles are reversing, they're changing. You've now got two partners that are both very career orientated. So it's like, well, where does that value come in and how does that work?
Oh, for sure. And also, I mean, that's compounded by the fact that like women get these hormonal surges when they have a baby that are not the same for men. So you have to train the man at the time when you are exhausted and really impatient. So you're like, I just want you to know how to do this and to know what this child needs, right? And usually if you're a parent who doesn't have just as many hours in the day with your child, like that's going to take longer to learn. So yeah, it's really about having the right conversations up front, So I have a note in here about avoiding the Tinder shorthand for expectations. So like having a tall, rich husband who travels, with all the badges on their Tinder profile is not the same as a person that will kiss you every day and rub your head when you're sick and teach your kids the things they need to know. So you really have to decide, well, in my mind, and part of this is the conditioning you grew up with, what did my parents model for me? And what are my expectations? What do I want? What do I not want? And having those conversations early would probably keep people together a lot longer.
So you've learned all this from marketing?
Yeah, so good.
This sounds like relationship therapy.
Well, it's psychology, right? But the reality is businesses have paid for a lot of the research, and so it all went into an economic landscape. But I find that, if you're talking about satisfying needs and desires, right, that's true of any human relationship you have, right? When your mom wants you to come to dinner every Sunday night and you're like, oh, I got to put a boundary here. Anyway, so.
But then Adriano's mum just does, was it cotoletta?
Cotoletta.
Oh, yeah. That's how she gets you over.
Mate, that's my,
Can I come?
Yeah, absolutely. So just going back to your thing about, being clear of what the expectations are. Like I find that very fascinating because there has been a sort of breakdown, and you mentioned about the nuclear family and everything else like that. But how do you I know this is a conversation that everyone should have with their own partner, but how do you set those boundaries? What are the boundaries? Like what are all their expectations? Like what are they supposed to be? Or, that's for you to find out, I guess.
Well, good question. I mean, for me, I was looking for someone that I wouldn't have a lot of conflict with, and that's true. In the beginning, we didn't have a lot of conflict, but we sort of go about this in a really intuitive way, and we shouldn't do that. We should be quite explicit about what our needs are.
Yeah.
And then it's really easy to evaluate a person. And so if I bring this back to marketing, I guess I would say, so if you're a brand like Ferrari, what's really hard for Ferrari is that you have to constantly maintain the ultimate in expectations, because that's the price point. So when you were talking about Formula One and the Honda engine doing well, this is very threatening to the Ferrari brand, right? And so the best you can do is say, okay, well, after you buy the Ferrari, so a lot of the research about like human behavior shows, even if you buy the Ferrari or you get the plastic surgery or you invest in these things that you think might make you happy or improve your quality of life, the benefit often isn't there. Like it's not sustained. So if Ferrari wants people to be advocates for the car, I mean, it's not just hopping behind the seat and going for a test drive. It's also that every time they encounter the brand, they get some sort of reinforcement or surprise. So the sort of third step in satisfaction. So you have setting the right expectations, and then you have meeting those basic needs and desires. You must cook me dinner, and you must take the child and, I don't know, do the nappies. Those kinds of things. After that, you need to validate the choice. And this is something that I think is probably the main part where relationships break down, because most of the time we're busy blaming our partner for the things they didn't do instead of appreciating the things they did. Yeah. So, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was like, he didn't take the garbage out, or the dishes are not doing it all. Yeah. As opposed to going, oh, well, actually, he did pay the rent and whatever. It was a low baseline. Yeah. Anyway.
But you're right there. But that's how we fall out of love with products and services. If you think about when you go to dinner, your expectations, and we speak about this a lot now, and going out for dinner in Sydney, it's a minimum of 100, 150 a head, right? If you're going to have a couple of cocktails and some wine. So you're talking $300 before you've even been surprised and delighted, right? With a cheeky after a mint at the end. So straight away, if you don't get that level of service or that level of quality of food, then your expectations haven't been met, and you're probably not going to go back to that restaurant. And that's sometimes a challenge now with products. And I think when you get to a high price point is, you have to sell less to make money, but you're setting expectations through the roof. And because our expectations are now increasing all the time, because we've got so much choice, there is so much variety out there with services and products, you're almost setting yourself up to fail.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think with the proliferation of brands and experiences and everybody trying to optimize for as many consumers as possible, it's increasingly important for brands to have a very specific identity and to chase those people based on customer lifetime value. So like the people who will love your brand forever, and you treat those people really well. So I use the example of, buying a waterproof mascara, right? So if I'm Revlon and I constantly, maybe once a month, I'll put the mascara on sale for 50% off, or there'll be a 2-for-1 or something like that. That teaches my consumer to switch brands and be price sensitive. And what I would recommend for consumers is pick a rule that's important to you, like maybe it's organic or non-toxic or whatever, and then stick with that rule and marry your mascara and make sure that you just are extremely brand loyal to that mascara, no matter what the influencers tell you about buying this other one because it's going to make your eyelashes more fluffy. Because realistically, would you notice the difference in your girlfriend's mascara? Right?
You're assuming I don't wear mascara. I don't know. My question was actually going to be, do people, so have you, if you look at your journey of wearing mascara, have you chopped and changed brands? Like, is that something that, what do you look for in a mascara?
Yeah, for sure. So like, I basically
is it price, or is it gloopiness, or what? Like,
right. So
gloopiness.
Hashtag gloopiness. Told you we were going to have fun today.
We are having fun. I'm having a great time. So like I am a child who grew up with teenage sisters in the 80s where there was a lot of blue eyeshadow, and having a bright mascara was a great thing. But I never learned.
Hairspray as well.
Yeah, can you tell? I never learned to like have one brand that I really liked. Now that I'm older and I had my kids, I was looking for like sustainable brands, but it's very hard to find a sustainable brand that works the same way that the high chemical brands work. So in my journey of mascara, I haven't married a mascara. I still do the thing. I buy whichever one is on sale because I just don't care. Yeah. But my belief is that particularly as consumers become more sustainably focused, they'll increasingly only go for those companies that are non-toxic and high performance and sustainable in their business practices. And that should wipe out the rest because actually we don't need this much choice in mascara.
Yeah.
right? So
With most things. Yes.
right,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, the proliferation of choice doesn't make us happier. I think the best thing you could do as a brand is basically become sort of the arbiter of taste, right? So we have a few compare the market, things like that, where they're trying to help consumers make decisions because it's too complicated.
So with the saturation and, expectation that John talks about, is it very hard to be satisfied?
Oh, for sure. Mostly because you are intrinsically satisfied after you've made the purchase, right? You, in theory, you've achieved the thing that you want, but that last step of the satisfaction process is validating the choice. And this is the thing that nobody does, right? So especially a company like Revlon, you're not on their mailing list, you're just buying at retail. So if you don't have a way to like send an email on their birthday and give them a free product, if you don't have a way to provide those moments of surprise, you're really at a deficient spot, because this is called like variable rate reinforcement, where you provide a surprise for the consumer and their response rate increases and there's a much slower extinction rate. So that just means that basically they're much more likely to stick with your brand if you delight and surprise them at irregular intervals, which is why you should never buy your partner flowers on Valentine's Day unless it's a requirement. But you should definitely buy your flowers on a day when it's not Valentine's Day.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Because it's like, right?
So you do what everyone does. You buy them on the 15th and they're half price.
Yeah, exactly right.
Which is what every woman wants.
Yeah.
From the local petrol station.
I love to be a bargain.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a bit like surprise and delight. So when you go out for dinner and you get a cheeky limoncello at the end, that's the kind of then you're like, oh, that's a nice touch. Or you get a nice kind of
right just before the bill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go, that's a nice touch. Yeah.
It is. That, I think the art of hospitality shouldn't be lost, right? Those moments of the little freebie are huge.
But not even hospitality. Like I went into Otti's earlier on this week, a little pizza place that Maribel had just opened up. And the guys said, oh, how can I help us? And there's a massive array of pizzas and sandwiches. Like, they all look amazing. I was like licking the window till it's Christmas Eve. And the guy said, how can I help? What do you want? And I went, I don't know. What do you like? There's so much choice. And he goes, oh, I like that one and that one. I said, great, let's just grab them. And he was so kind of happy that I'd asked him for his opinion, and then he'd said that, and I'd said, let's crack on with it. It was a roast beef sandwich and a salami pizza, and they were amazing. But that kind of a little bit of, I think, back and forth, that relationship stuff goes so much further nowadays in hospitality when you go out shopping as well. And I know people like to shop online, but I think as humans, when we all have needs, and this comes back to the consumer behaviour, right? We all have needs. We're trying to fulfill a need by doing this. So when we have a little bit of back and forth, that makes the experience so much better. It makes the experience more memorable. We're going to tell more people. We're then going to go back. It's like cheaper cost of acquisition just to be nice.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, if you think of it, the baseline for a marriage, right? Just that my partner is going to be nice to me. That's something that like a lot of us miss.
I'm glad I said cost of acquisition. You went marriage.
Yes. Sorry. Recently divorced. Anyway, but I think to your point, I had a friend who was like the best salesperson for J. Crew, and it was because she would tell people, oh, no, those jeans do not look good on you. Let me get you a different pair. So she was incredibly authentic, right? They never thought she was a salesperson because that she was just in it for the sale. She thought they all felt that she was there to make them look good. Yeah. And I think authenticity in branding is the other thing that a lot of companies miss. When you're trying to be all things to all people, you often just don't have an identity.
Yeah.
So
better to be a specialist than a generalist. Specialists make more money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think if you can charge people a bit more for something that they really love. So remember at OFX we used to have the CTO who called it the minimum lovable product. And so it's not the minimum viable product, it's the minimum lovable product. And I think that's something to keep in mind.
I like it. I don't remember that one.
Oh.
I don't remember that one. But anyway, okay. And so go on. So you talk about billionaires to your class. How do they all react? Because that sounds so attractive to be a billionaire. But a divorced billionaire...
You're still half a billionaire.
Valid, yeah.
Now you get 2 billionaires.
Yeah. So what are some of the strategies? I mean, I think you blew Adriano's mind there about kind of framing a relationship. How would you, so if you're in company, how would you perhaps frame a relationship with a potential customer? What are some of the things you would look for?
Sure. Well, let me move more into one of the tactics used by marketers, which is classical conditioning. And classical conditioning is about generating associations or working off of associations that people already have to make your message go through. So whether you're talking about a relationship or a brand, you come to the table with associations that are already in your mind.
So Coca-Cola Christmas.
Sure, I guess so.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So whatever kind of associations you already have, that's usually what people use in their marketing messages, right? To try to link up something like, durability with toothpaste, right? Sensodyne used some hard hats because we know that a hard hat means toughness and durability. It's a stretch, if you ask me, but that's anyway.
The long bow.
Who the hell signed that one off?
I don't know. There's a lot of mediocre advertising out there.
Agreed.
But increasingly, marketing is moving away from. So when I was learning about marketing, we'd talk about like one ad or one TV spot. But marketing is now a system and a process, which is called operant conditioning that moves you, or instrumental conditioning. So it moves you through behaviors. So if classical conditioning is based on associations, instrumental conditioning is based on establishing a behavior pattern that you want consumers to do. And one of the most nefarious ways that companies do this, if you take Uber, for example, and you usually pay for the upgrade, or you usually pay for the faster, what they have built into some of their algorithms, I think, is negative conditioning. So if you choose not to do it one day, they will make your order sort of at the end of the queue, so that the next time you go, I don't want to wait that long. Remember how long it took when I didn't pay for the upgrade? And negative reinforcement is extremely pernicious in terms of how it gets you right away aware that you want something other than what you got. So Uber is still really, really convenient, but these are sort of in the category of dark patterns, right? Where it's easy to sign up to the New York Times, but it's really not easy to cancel your subscription. And this is the real risk in the consumer marketplace, because all the companies have focused on your cash going out the door. Subscriptions that you don't use, whatever it is, things that, theoretically.
Often thought that, yeah.
Right.
Dead money that they're banking on it.
Absolutely. And
I have no idea how many subscriptions I've got.
Yeah, and some of them come around once a month, and some of them come around once a year. I mean, I can't believe the government hasn't legislated. If you haven't used an app or a subscription in 3 months, they cannot continue to charge you. Yeah. Why did they not do that? Like, we're facing a cost of living crisis like you wouldn't believe. But the algorithms are all focused on cash going out, and nobody's focused on cash coming in. And so I think this is kind of the first time in modern history where it's not going to really matter that much what the RBA or the Fed does in terms of interest rates, because people are subject to these behavioral influences from algorithms that condition them to make bad decisions, basically economically. And it's really hard to slow the cash going out when there's no way to augment the cash coming in.
So is there any way to sort of govern this sort of manipulation, or you can only do it at the peer, at the person rather than the company or?
Well, I think there's this is where it goes to they call it like decision rules, right? So if you take half an hour and think about what are really the most important rules for what I want to purchase. Let's hope it's sustainability for people, right? Usually it's not. Usually it's price. But let's just say, okay, I'm not going to be vulnerable to price. I'm going to spend half an hour making sure that most of my purchases are in line with sustainable goals because I have decided that that's important. Then you're much more able to shut down the bombardment of external messaging. And it'll save you time in the future if you do something like marry a mascara and just say, I don't care. I don't care if my friends advocate for a different one or the influencers do. I'm sticking with this one. It's really about choosing to be satisfied based on something that you actually made a conscious choice about, instead of choosing to chase. I used to have a professor in the design school. She said it was called chasing the perfect. And so you're constantly saying, oh, my eyelashes are pretty fluffy, but they could be fluffier. And really, that's kind of silly, right? So if you just choose to say, no, I'm satisfied with this because this was my decision-making rule, as opposed to being there in the moment going, oh, but that one's 50% off. And you go, no, I'm not changing it. Or you say, in mascara, I'm not going to care about this. I'm only going to care about price.
So are you saying that all the noise that we're getting and all the messaging and all the ad and all that, we're kind of no longer, we're now almost...
We're not in control.
We're not in control of the decisions we make. We're almost in that kind of habitual spending pattern of subscriptions and
Passengers.
Taco Tuesday and all that kind of stuff. So, but we're in that kind of...
Tuesday, it is.
We're in this little cadence of just not really existing, just kind of spending.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not that you're not in control of your decisions. It's that when you're overwhelmed, you're more likely to rely on a bias. And when you rely on a bias, it's way easier for markets to exploit it.
Yeah, and because we're overwhelmed by all the messaging that we're getting and constant notifications and work and life and parenthood and all of that, it's easier to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I don't know, I don't have great tools for structuring my own life, but I would suggest if you say, okay, I'm not going to shop from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. or whatever, you say, I'm only going to shop from 7:30 to 8 in the morning when I'm crisp and clear. I think it's really about reclaiming your time, because when things siphon your awareness and when they siphon your attention, they steal your time. And relationships, I used to have a friend who said, love is spelled Time. So if you aren't giving your relationship time, then you aren't giving it the love it requires.
So what are some of the guidelines or boundaries you give yourself?
Oh, mostly I think it helps to be aware, but there's a great course on Coursera about learning about happiness, which says that just knowing is not actually half the battle. You have to implement strategies. And the problem is it takes time to implement a strategy for your life. So I guess I think whenever possible, running subscriptions that you're going to use, right? Or saying, well, instead of going to yoga class, I'm going to have sort of like a mindful development of my goals and values for an hour, because there's no app for that, because no one's trying to sell you something, right? But you need to carve it out for yourself and say, this is my hour a week where I'm checking, are my behaviors in line with my values? Because you can't spend your way into happiness. You have to kind of hold back the tidal wave of all of society's influences. Right now are not, some of them are quite toxic.
I run a networking community called Bio. And last January, so 2023, we did a bit of a survey of our members. And it was really like, what's your focus of this year? So nothing kind of War and Peace. It was just like, what's your focus? And I'd say 95% of the members all said their focus was on themselves. And I think it was a kind of hangover of COVID where we were locked up for a long time. We then had that year, so 22 of just saying yes to everything because we'd been kind of locked up, especially down in Melbourne. And then everyone was just exhausted. And then so 23 was like the year to reclaim themselves, be it mentally, spiritually, exercise, rekindle with family and friends in a nice way. So that was really interesting to hear that in a group of professionals, employees, business owners, all of that, just to go, I need to focus on me because I'm exhausted.
Yeah, and I think it's because people don't understand what's making them feel so disgruntled in the modern era, right? We're not able to push back against these influences like capitalism or the 24-hour news cycle or any of these other things that are just part and parcel of the modern world. But what they say is that like basically people in the 1940s and 50s were way happier because they were not exposed to all this content that you not only need to know like who Angelina Jolie is, you need to know if there's a war in Eritrea in addition to what Putin did last week. It's too much to be on top of. Yeah. And because of the proliferation of media, it really is like the Tower of Babel in terms of misery, where none of us can have the same conversation because everybody wants to feel like they're informed, or they feel like if I don't know X, I'll be perceived as lesser. And I would just say, be happy to be uninformed about stuff and just practice listening. And then you can reclaim like your whole night, right? So you don't have to consume anything. That's the best way to reclaim your own time. Have some idle time that you spend no money, and you just clarify how you would actually execute your values if you didn't have all these influences.
Got it?
Absolutely. I was thinking about that on the way here, actually, and I have no idea we were speaking to Margo.
There you go. But you're pretty good at systems. Like you are Mr. Systems and Process. The challenge is if you've got 5 minutes free in a day, you'll fill it out.
Yeah, I'm a bit.
You don't allow yourself nothing.
No, it's
downtime.
horrible. Yeah, it's a bit of a toxic trait, I guess. But I have been trying to make some more time for myself.
Yeah.
You know, I do go to the gym early in the morning. I find that to be quite therapeutic, walking to the gym and back.
Mm-hmm.
I was speaking to Dutch just on the way here, actually, about getting back into meditation, which I really enjoyed, which was fantastic, as long as it's not Headspace, because they'll try and sell you something. You sort of do need those disconnects, and conscious of time. I very much so. Like I've tried to, like from 7 o'clock, as soon as I get home, I no longer go on social media. You know, I try and stay away from that sort of stuff, which is really good and helps me wind down. If I'm not doing that, I'm definitely, either making music, doing podcast, at an event, at the racetrack, doing this, doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to feel like you have enough time is to give your time to other people. So, having this opportunity to come and talk to you guys, none of us are getting paid. We're just enjoying ourselves. This is something that we're really missing in the modern life when you have the sort of Vaynerchuk side hustle, optimize yourself mentality. And that's a real thing, right? Like automation and AI is definitely coming for your job, right? There's no doubt about it. So in my opinion, governments aren't going to save you and companies sure aren't going to save you. And you need to do this sort of community-rooted sharing of what we want in the future, because otherwise you're going to have so much poverty, so much sadness, so much disconnect that we really need to say, no, we want the time to have fun and party and dance and play the way humans should.
One of my curiosities about consumer behaviour is how do they nail it? How do they get us when we're all so different? Some of us think emotionally, some of us think rationally. We spoke before we came on the podcast about a lot of it's down to our parents' conditioning. I can imagine all three of us in the room have all been brought up very differently with different experiences, different values, different beliefs. Well, there might be some similarities, and maybe that's it. But how do they do that? What do we need to be aware of?
Oh, well, the number one thing to be aware of with a company like Google, right, which spent a lot of time developing something called lookalike audiences. So if you have 2 or 3 data points that match Adriano's, then they can infer from
That's a lucky audience, eh?
They can infer from his behavior what you might do, even if you haven't given them that level of specificity. And because we don't teach psychology in schools, right? Did you know about any of this stuff before we came here tonight? I mean, you have maybe a vague sense of what conditioning is, but because we don't teach our children how their brain works, they are just lambs to the slaughter, right? So Marshall McLuhan had this great quote about Little Red Riding Hood, reared on singing commercials, has no objection to being eaten by the wolf. And that's basically what's happening, is we're all getting eaten by this machine, and we don't object to it because it's all we've ever known, and no one has taught us how our brain worked. And if we knew that all the expert neuroscientists were going to use what they knew about our brain just to sell us stuff, we might go to Google and we might say, hang on, this is not acceptable. You cannot use what are essentially weapons just to siphon money out of our pockets at the expense of our health and well-being. And that's some of the conversations that are happening in government. It's just too late because government can't stop capitalism. It's part and parcel of the same system, which is why you really have to sort of establish your own priorities. And that's tiring.
Yeah. So I was wondering before, there seems to be a lot of manipulation and stuff like that. And why isn't it illegal?
Well,
why are people allowed to just, if they understand a certain thing and make you empty your pockets to them? Like, it's theft, really. just figured out a way how to rob me without legally, really.
Sure, right. Well, it all goes back to people having finite attention, which is the same in the systems that we build, right? So Congress in America can only pass a certain number of laws because there's a finite number of hours in the day. Everything in our life is finite except for the proliferation of content and marketing messages, right? And so when you say, why isn't it illegal? It's because they're busy passing bills that you need to have a video camera on the front of your truck so you don't drive over your toddler. And that is not the most important conversation that Congress needs to be having. And they're sort of getting around to it, but the government really doesn't have a big enough whip because there's no, I think Mark Zuckerberg testified before Congress. Lots of the tech guys have testified. But if you look at, and I don't mean to sound ageist, but if you look at the population of people running the country, right, they aren't aware of these, like what happens to a young mind that has been raised with a screen 10 centimeters from their face since the time they were 2 years old. Biden grew up in the 40s, 50s when things were still, he was able to develop different brain patterns.
Oh, even those conversations that they had with Mark Zuckerberg and everything in Congress, like who was asking those questions? They were like dinosaurs. They had no idea what they were talking about.
Oh, well, exactly. And I mean, you would see this in the corporate world
and
too.
the TikTok guy.
Right.
That was embarrassing. That was embarrassing.
I think the whole thing is that everybody wants to be proficient in like tech, right? But there's a huge spectrum in terms of what technology entails. And if you're proficient in servers, you might not be proficient in SEO. And if you're proficient in SEO, you might not be proficient in AI. But when you put all these things together, as companies like Google has done, they have what Buckminster Fuller would call like a really toxic synergy. And this synergy is the problem. And what are you going to do? Are you going to force Google to become a not-for-profit organization? Are you going to force them to pay dividends back to all the people who have Google accounts? Because it's our data that they use to train their AI models. Shouldn't we get a cut of that? And so there are things that governments just don't have the balls to execute.
That's what it comes down to.
There's your answer. Why do you love this so much? Like, what's your...
That sounds fascinating.
No, but so I love it too, but it sounds like... Has this kind of come from your marketing learnings, or have you suddenly gone, actually, this is really important to me now because you're a mother as well and you're teaching it and you're seeing other things? Like, how has this now arrived where, because you seem really passionate about this, which I love.
Oh, yeah. So, when I was younger, all of this stuff was just done on intuition.
Yeah.
Right? And I was lucky enough to be validated in my intuition in terms of how to persuade people. But when I look at what's happening to my kids, it is impossible not to get angry at, I cannot compete with these influencers who are selected for being basically grandstanding douchebags all day long. And my kids want to emulate this, right? And so the way that they speak to me, or the things that they think are cool, or the behaviors that they think are acceptable, are, in my mind, totally uncivilized, because we don't want to deal with people who are constantly attention-seeking all the time. When I grew up in the 80s, that was just rude.
Yeah.
And now everybody's like that. Because we don't get any validation, or basically we created these platforms for validations that are likes, and Facebook gets to choose likes, shares, comments, how valid you are. Well, if you're a teenager and you are in this sort of social environment where you need validation beyond like someone laughing at your joke, right? That's how we used to get validation. We used to have eye contact.
People used to laugh at my jokes.
Yeah, I still laugh at your jokes.
Thanks.
But Adriano doesn't.
Yeah, I laugh at you too.
But those are forms of social validation that we don't get anymore.
Yeah.
And so it goes back to everybody needs affirmation, and it's so scarce. It's so scarce to have someone go, thank you for what you did today. You did a really great job. Then we're all like, can somebody please click the like button on my Instagram? It's so depressing.
Yeah, really.
Well, that was one of the reasons they got rid of the number of likes.
No, I think you can still choose to have it on.
No, I think they got rid of it.
I'm pretty sure you can turn it on. They got rid of it. They blanketed it and they got rid of it. But I'm pretty sure you can choose it because I can see it sometime on people's Instagram. It says like how many likes it's got.
Oh, I thought they got rid of it.
They did get rid of it but you had to re-enable it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because some people has it.
And I'm assuming this all feeds into, again, we talk about the behaviour stuff. So if I like pages, I mean, it must be. Is it easier for companies now to get to the consumer? Or is it harder? Like, is there so much content where it's harder, or have they got so much data that it's easier?
It's behind a paywall now, isn't it?
Well, I think it depends, right? So let's say you want to launch a new brand of containers, and you're just going to do it online. You can use the muscle of these algorithms to create awareness for a product that never existed in a way that you never could have when you were a dude in a neighborhood trying to get people to look at the new box you designed.
Yeah.
So that's the advantage, is that a new product entrant has, I think, a much easier time of reaching people in the digital landscape.
Yeah.
Even among all the noise?
Well, because Google is incentivized for you to be successful, because otherwise they don't make any money. Because if your business fails, they're not getting the ad revenue.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people that run their businesses only online.
So, from a business point of view, consumer behaviour is in a great place. From a personal and from a ethical, where we're at, and in terms of a mental point of view, we're not in a good space.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have not held the corporations that provide this muscle to other enterprises accountable for the net losses that sort of civilians or regular people face because of the way these technologies were designed. And that's basically not anybody's fault, right? So you have quarterly shareholder returns, you have a Silicon Valley sort of ethos that it's profit and growth at all costs, and nobody really shames you for making money, right? We're in a culture that everybody wants more money, particularly now, cost of living crisis, got to differentiate yourself somehow. In the news, it's all about billionaires, so, being a millionaire is not enough. And all of that feeds into these companies appearing to be blameless because all they did was follow the rules. And the rules say you can do that. There's no rule that says you can't. And basically, that's why communities have to self-organize to get out of this, if that's what they want. They have to decide that we're going to create a green day, 1 day a week, where we all take our kids off of screens and we do it as a community so that our kids don't feel like they're missing out on their video games. Because I can tell you that as an individual parent trying to, chisel my kids away from their devices, it's impossible because I can't sell myself enough, right? Like I'm not a compelling offer. I'm like, let's go out to lunch. Well, they go out to lunch all the time. They don't care. They want to hang with their friends, right? They want to go shoot people in a Fortnite scenario. They don't want to hang out with a 44-year-old woman who is not conditioned to be like sensational, right? So if you don't have communities steering your kids in this way, then it's like you don't have a carrot.
Yeah, the old carrot and stick.
I've seen some of the content that kids consume these days, and it's fucking garbage.
Oh yeah, I mean, I am astonished at the low quality of a lot of content.
Yeah.
Even what comes out of Hollywood or what comes out of Netflix. I mean, really, communities need to take back their stories.
It seems like there's no original thought anymore as well. Everything's getting rehashed and redone, and it's all the same old stuff.
Yeah, well, the conditions required for creativity are to not be bombarded by noise, right? That's like a baseline. So.
Yeah, I was actually listening to an old Joe Rogan podcast with Guy Ritchie on, and I think this was actually before he made Aladdin, so it tells you how long ago it was. But he was kind of referencing, to your point, a lot of the films have got, like Mission Impossible 37, Fast and Furious, 1,000,001 and all that. There's no real creativity because creativity has a risk. And so, you can back yourself on a Top Gun 2, you can back yourself on a Fast and Furious with cameos and all that kind of stuff. But actually to make, and he was saying, to make a Lock, Stock, to make a Snatch, to make a Gentleman and all that, there's huge commercial risk then, and obviously risk for him in terms of making the movie. And that's just some of the difference of that risk and reward, really.
Oh, absolutely. I had no idea that Hollywood basically required massive cohort of investors to get a film made. And so they have to go out and seek funding for a film.
Yeah.
So I know I said I wasn't going to talk about this, but we were trying to start a not-for-profit, basically a club, startup, newsociety.club. There's no content there. But the point was that you would vet amateur content in the community, so you would reduce that risk, and communities would actually tell the stories that they thought were salient, instead of having, some dude or group of women in the New York office deciding what we need to read over here in Pyrmont, Australia.
And so how's that going? Are you getting funding for it, or is it?
So I haven't, but luckily being at UNSW, there are lots of super intelligent people, so I'm going to chat with a friend who's a VC expert tomorrow. So cool. You never know. I might kick it back up again. It just, timing is everything, and everybody's pretty strapped for time.
Yeah,
definitely.
And that's exactly what we've spoken about, isn't it? No one's got time for the good stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you need muscle, right? None of us have muscle as individuals to defeat these influences. But as a cohort, actually, a lot of us agree. And middle-aged moms tend to be kind of really angry about this stuff.
Yeah. And is that purely as a byproduct of being mums, and I guess having those challenges that you referenced earlier with the kids away on TVs and screens and all that kind of stuff? Or is it that the kids need to have the next best thing? And because I remember when I was a kid many years ago, I wanted a pair of Reebok pumps, and they were like £100. They were over £100 for these shoes, right? And my dad was, I can't repeat this, but my dad was just like, no way. I won't use that language on this. And I think I was like, I've got a pair of like High Tech or something like that. Is that even a brand anymore? High Tech?
No.
That talks to my age, doesn't it?
I've got no idea what that shoe is. High Tech? No.
You must remember High Tech. You're an 80s kid, Margo.
Sure.
Yeah.
You're an 80s kid. You love your trainers.
Yeah, I do. I've got a lot of sneakers, but I've never heard of that.
You got Reebok pumps?
Absolutely.
Right,
I've got a brand new pair.
So anyway, I wanted a pair of these Reebok pumps, and I just wasn't allowed them because they were just too expensive. And I guess what was probably nice is I only had a couple of mates that had them, and so it's just like I didn't feel like I was missing out loads. But I can imagine now when you see everyone online wearing them, and you see everyone at school having them, and you see your friends and this massive community, you feel like you're missing out on something. That actually it wasn't a big deal in the end. It was pretty sweet, and it was like a momentary thing. But I can imagine that now is just 100% kind of highlighted everywhere else because you're seeing everyone else have something that you want, like an iPhone, right? iPhone must be another kind of analogy now. Everyone's got to have the latest iPhone.
Sure, because we don't have time to establish our own values. We are taught sort of materialistic consumption values, right? So if we don't have a mechanism for rewarding kids for courage and humility and kindness and a sense of humor, then something else fills that gap, which is fancy shoes, right? Because nobody gives you, at least when I was a kid, people might do Eagle Scouts, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, any of those things. You might be at your church and you might get praised for those kinds of altruistic behaviors. There's no structure for that because there's no money in that. And without that structure to hold on to the things that we care about, we're just getting swept away, right? And there's like massive amounts of religious attrition and all those things, even though actually the research pretty much shows you're likely to be a lot happier if you identify with a community and you spend time in one of those religious communities. Gives you time to think about things. But my dad used to say, I want you to think of your dream car and go, what is it? And you go, oh, I really want a Jag convertible. And he'd go, 20 years from now, you can have it. And that's the thing that marketers are trying to do all the time is the opposite, right? So we're creating the urgency and the sense of scarcity that you need to acquire this right now because a pair of Reebok shoes 5 years later isn't important to you. And if you actually look at your spending habits, the next time you go, oh God, I really want that Hermes bracelet, right? And you go, is this actually going to be meaningful to me 5 years from now? Probably not. It's just like a momentary thing. So put up your walls and I don't know, put that money to better use. Like you'd probably feel a lot better if you sent your $2,000 to Africa, right? I know that sounds kind of cliche, but
Yeah.
It would be cool to do a survey on buyer's remorse of everyone that used all the buy now, pay later stuff.
Oh no, I never did.
What
I've
they
never
use
done one of
Afterpay
those.
and all that kind of stuff. Like, how much buyer's remorse did you have just to have something now, rather than maybe wait a couple of months and save up for it, then to go buy it? I mean, yeah, we all get buyer's remorse and stuff like that, but in terms of just that, that creating urgency to have it now, and I guess giving people the ability to have it now. You know, you don't have to wait till next month's paycheck. You can grab it now.
I'm a massive consumerist, right? I get excited just by purchasing the part or purchasing like my shoes, for example, right? I got sneakers. I got 50% of my sneakers I've never even worn or taken out of the box. So I just like that I buy them, I've got them, and then that's it. It's as far as it goes. You know, it's absolutely ridiculous.
You're a marketer's dream.
Yeah.
I'm in sales. I'm a marketer's dream. I love being sold to.
I buy a lot of synthesizers, and then, you know, I got them, they're cool, I play with them, but then I usually make music using other synthesizers, but I've got these synthesizers. So it's like, fuck, I hope Vanessa doesn't listen to this. So why am I such a consumerist? Why am I such an easy target? It really pisses me off as well, because I just love to buy shit, but then I don't use it.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the research suggests that those like momentary highs are really fleeting and they don't provide satisfaction. So what's probably happening is you're missing out on some other form of validation, and you're finding validation from shoes. So what we need is to get Vanessa on the line and have her go, honey, thank you so much for doing that podcast today. I really enjoyed hearing your perspective. And then maybe you'd be like, okay, let's go out for dinner instead of buying the shoes, right? But it's like, we're all like that. It's, if you're not getting some sort of attaboy or attagirl from your partner or your parents or your boss, you're gonna try to find it in the only material way you can. And so it's not rare. I know a lot of people who really want to have the stuff, right? I mean, we all do, myself included. I brought my status symbol bag today because I want people to know that I'm a mover and a shaker and I'm on a podcast. But, you know, it's something that we all desire, which is just a sense of status and achievement. And because the only people in the news who have status and achievement are billionaires, and it's really hard to compete with that. And so we're left feeling like we're not enough. And so what I would say is, like, you are totally enough. Just being, you know, Joe Schmo averages like we are, slightly above average, of course, way above average, but right? Like you are satisfactory. And that's just a message we never receive. And that is what is so toxic about what we know about consumer behavior, is that it's designed to make you feel that way.
That's great.
Depressing, eh?
Yeah, I know, right?
But you can fight it.
Yeah.
But it's super valid though, because it's like when you get, I guess when you're comfortable with yourself, and when you get enough from your, as Margo was saying, you get enough feedback, words of affirmation. Look, I guess the whole love languages thing, right? That's not just for couples. That you could use that same thing with your friends,
Yeah, of course.
and your family, right? To work out how they give and receive love, and that doesn't have to be, you know, taking them on a date and whatever. That could just be words of affirmation, right? And it's funny when you start to work that out in your circle of friends and with your partner and things do become a little easier, a little clearer, a little cleaner, and it is a better space to be, because I think you've just got a few more answers to things you don't know. So your question earlier on about how do you frame it, it's a very painful conversation to have, because it's a hard conversation, it's tough, but then it makes everything else really easy. So it's like if we said, okay, Margo, tonight we're going to come on, we're going to talk for an hour. We're not going to talk 59 minutes or 61 minutes. We're going to talk for an hour. Instead, we know exactly how long we've got to go. We're kind of framing that bit. We're at 50 at the moment. It doesn't matter. But like, it's just about that bit, and then it makes everybody else comfortable. So it's like if you go to a restaurant and it's $100 a head, fixed menu, you know you're going to spend $100 a head. Everybody, if you go with a big group of people, everyone's then comfortable because they know the rules of the game and they know how to play it. It's when you don't know the rules of the game. And I think what we've been talking about today is people haven't been aware of the rules. They don't know what game they're playing, and the fact actually they're in the game, and they're the target of the game.
Absolutely. And I think if you take that moment to establish your own values, you might find that, okay, well, I could buy another pair of shoes that I don't actually need, or I could take that $50 and give it to a homeless person and see how I feel. I'm not.
You think his shoes are $50?
No. I was trying to be generous. Diplomatic. That's the better word.
And the shoes that I wear are the rattiest shoes.
But they're their favorites, right?
Yeah,
That's
they're
you
most
always.
comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. So,
But actually, I think he's actually a really good example, because you say you're kind of mass consumerism, but you're actually quite select in stuff you buy. So you like your trainers, you like your wine, you like your music stuff. You don't go and buy a load of willy-nilly rubbish.
No. It's
you're quite selective.
Very niche.
Yeah. And so that's kind of okay from that side of things. You know, that's better, because then you're believing in the stuff you buy. You're buying that. Yeah, you might buy a little bit too much, but Christ, that's.
Well, I think you might decide that, like, instead of, so if you have rules around dining, right? So you might say, I'm going to eat at home 3 nights a week. I'm going to get takeout 2 nights a week, and once a week I'm going to go for a really special meal, so that you're in control of, like, when you go out, and you're setting the expectation. Because right now, like, food is really hard to manage. Some days we're overworked, and then we're like, oh, there's nothing in the fridge, so we buy a ton, but we don't feel like cooking it the next day, and somebody just invited us over. And so that's why there's food waste, right? Because we don't have a structure around when are we eating out, when are we eating in. But if you create that structure for yourself, you might end up going, oh, it's Friday, it's my dinner at Tetsuya's day. Right? And
every Friday.
Well, one can dream, right?
I'll come with you on Friday.
Yeah, so once a month, once a year. So in agile, project management, they talk about a communication pattern. And so you need to start building these patterns for your own life. This is what we do every day. This is what we do every week. This is what we do every month. And find those things where you're wasting money or spending it on something. And I know it's kind of ridiculous to be like, oh, give your $200 to a homeless guy. But, like, you'll actually probably feel like you have enough if you find a way to give to people who have less. Because the thing that the consumer behavior environment will never tell you is that you have enough. And so if you never have stories from people who have less, and you only see stories from people who have more, of course you're always on this aspirational rat wheel trying to get to the next phase of life that you should be able to achieve, instead of being satisfied with where you are, because actually you got it pretty good.
What a lovely note to finish on.
I know, right? I was just thinking that.
Well, I've loved this chat. I know we could go on for a hell of a lot longer.
Absolutely.
How do people, who can attend your lectures, you said obviously you teach children, but do you teach anyone? How do people, like, if people listen to this and go, wow, I want to have a chat with you more, or I want to come to one of your lectures, how do people get in contact?
Oh, I don't think they can come to my lectures at UNSW.
Okay.
And my students would be annoyed if I called them children.
We're all children.
Yes.
My gran would say we're all God's children.
Yes, it's so true, so true. You can find me on LinkedIn, Margo Hofmann, with 1 F and 2 N's. And I'm open to work. I'm open to chats. So there's, or reach out to John via the podcast. Awesome. He'll be my agent.
Yeah, nice.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on. That was epic. Thank you.
It was really enlightening. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. What a pleasure.